was challenging the people and said, nobody talks to Jews like that. Nobody talks to the people of God like that. He's the one who was so excited about bringing the ark up to Jerusalem. He built they did it twice. Once they couldn't get it up there, he brought it up again. When he gets to Jerusalem, he's singing and dancing, and his wife says to him, that was embarrassing for the king to do that. And he says, I'll do that more for God. This is the guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Now I'm going to read some stories about him.
Not a fine match.
You should know that the stories of David are the main section of the book of Chronicles. Chronicles is a summary books, if you want to divide them in half, starting with Genesis and ending with the return from exile. It actually leads to Ezra and Nehemiah, which are actually put in front of it in the canon. But the key person in Chronicles is David. The stories we're about to read do not appear in Chronicles. We're going to see why.
Bad stories.
We're going to see why. The guy edited the book of Samuel to make David into
The David we know and love.
yes. And this is the David that could appear on The Bold and the Beautiful, or
Showing your
whatever.
Or Jerry Springer or whatever.
Yeah. At the turn of the year, the season when kings go out to battle, which is in the spring. It's about right now. In the Middle East, you don't go to war in November or December. It rains. And it's cold. You're not taking your troops out in the rain and the cold. But you get to April, the weather's going to be beautiful for 6 months. That's the war season, invasion season. We call it agency, which is why, which is probably the reason why the period we're in now, the Sphera period, the Omer period, is a semi-mourning period. This is the invasion season, and one of the best places to invade, one of the important places to invade, is Israel. So turning to the season when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with them. They devastated Ammon. They besieged Rabbah. This is into present-day Jordan. David remained in Jerusalem. Late one afternoon, David rose from his couch, took a nap. Up until 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 1 to 4 was sacred. And it is still sacred in many places in the Middle East. So when you take your nap. When I got to Israel in '68, to my shock, businesses were open from 8 to 1 and 4 to 7. You try to go to a bank at 2 o'clock, there's only one bank open at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That was the Chicago American Bank. Because they were doing American time. 1 to 4, nothing.
It's siesta.
It's siesta time. It's exactly what it is. There's a commentary. The oldest complete commentary in the entire Tanakh that's in English is the Cincino multi-volume, and they use the word siesta in describing what David was doing. Right? But it's also the internal clock of human beings are also. You go to sleep there. It's hot in the middle of the day.
Wait a minute, is this just Jerusalem or all of
Everywhere.
Israel?
Jerusalem is cool.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I meant the sleeping.
Yeah, everywhere. Everywhere in the Middle East. From around the Mediterranean basin. Everybody sleeps in the middle of the afternoon. That's the internal clock that you got. Your circadian clock does that. And it's just too hot.
Between 8 and 9 o'clock.
And even in King David's palace, the air conditioning was
Some of us do that now.
and we should. It actually is a really good idea.
What is it?
Take
Take naps.
I thought
So late one afternoon, David rose from his couch and he strolled on the roof of the royal palace, which overlooked all of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, remember, is on a hill, on a slant, and the palace is at the top of the hill. And it's there deliberately so that David can see, he's the king, he can see what's going on in the town, especially if the town is invaded. And that's the high spot, so you can see everything. They were short on the road, and from the roof you saw a woman bathing. How do you see a woman bathing?
Took out his binoculars.
He had good eyesight, he didn't need his binoculars.
Roofs in Jerusalem then and everywhere else, or roofs if you would rather, but it's roofs. Roofs were flat. That's why there's a law in the Torah that says you have to put a parapet, you have to put a fence around the roof because people would fall off. And the reason they're flat is so they could catch water during the rainy season. And then you store it up there. That's your water thing. Also, that's a place to put your flax to dry it out so you can make linen. If you recall the story we mentioned last week about the two spies who go to Jericho, they were hidden on the roof under the flax. Because they use the roof as another room. This woman's up on the roof. She's using the water that's on the roof. It's flat. She's bathing. Well, the local Targets had run out of shower curtains.
And bathing suits.
Well,
No, she was taking a bath.
She was taking a bath.
Bathing.
Right.
And there was no reason for her to think that this was not something she could do. She's on the roof, fans. Who can see her?
They came.
Only the people in the palace, standing on the roof of the palace. The woman was very beautiful. The king sent someone to make inquiries about the woman. He reported she's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. The name of her husband, Uriah, is a very interesting one, because he's a Hittite. He's not a Judean. He's not an Israelite. He's a Hittite. He's from but the name Uriah is a Hebrew name. It means, the Lord is my light. So, exactly who is he?
The term Hittite refers to Turkey.
Well, actually, not in this period. In this period, the Hittites were one of the seven nations that the Israelites were told that they had to conquer.
So it's
And destroy.
And destroy. That's another thing to say, by the way. Uriah the Hittite was a major figure in the army. Armies in those days conquering armies were paid for by the king. Much of them tax money, maybe most of them tax money, but there was no draft except if you were being invaded. If you're being invaded, then everybody goes to arms to try to protect. But if you're talking about offensive wars where you're trying to get territory and get booty and stuff like that, that's all privately financed by the government, by the king. He's got non-Israelites in the army who are incredibly loyal to him, by the way. One of the things about David is he inspires incredible loyalty, for the most part. Anyway, so we've got Uriah the Hittite. He's got a daughter, wife Bathsheba, who is an Israelite. She's the daughter of Eliam. David sent messengers to fetch her. She came to him, and he lay with her. She shows up, he just says, gotcha.
He's the king.
There's not right. So she's married. So why does she do this? There seems to be no protest here whatsoever. We get protests, we're going to get some protests later. Not from her. So why did she protest? Well, one possibility is she's afraid to turn down the king. The king.
I don't feel that.
You don't feel that?
No, I don't think she was
What do you
afraid. I
think?
think she really wanted to get pregnant by him, because I think she wanted the king's offspring. Especially if it were a son.
If she has the king's offspring, then what?
If what?
If she has the king's offspring, what good does that do to her if she's still married to
Well,
Uriah?
Well, obviously she didn't stay married to
Well,
Uriah.
did she know that at the time?
No, but I think she was kind of one of those conniving people that thought she'd do something
She
about
got
it. It's the
privilege.
feeling I got from her.
So yes, if she's before the king's may be very nice to her and get privileges to her, right?
Yeah.
So she was ambitious.
She could very well have been ambitious,
Yeah, she
right?
looking for something more than what she had.
Recognizes this was a main chance here. So she's not, this is not a problem for her. Adultery
But
done.
they do point out that she had just been to the mikveh.
So what does that mean?
She's in her very most fertile period.
That is correct.
She's primed.
She is primed. Does she know she's primed? Did they know that they was primed? Yeah, they must have known because it's included as a detail here. Of course, the other reason they could mention that she went to the mikvah is to mention to everybody who's listening to the story, look, David may be an adulterer, but he doesn't do that. You know, sleep with women who are having a period. Which
He's
is,
an adulterer and orders a murder, but he
But
doesn't
he's
do
the-
that
that.
he doesn't do.
There's a line you don't want to step.
Right? So, anyways, she's up there, he sees her, he gets her, maybe she's flattered that the king wants her, maybe, well, where's her husband been all this time? He's out in the field, we're gonna find out for a long time. Maybe she, you know. And David,
She was learning.
How young could she be?
Oh,
certainly young enough to get married, to have kids, and young enough so she doesn't have any other children. We hear nothing about other children. And if Uriah is a general in the army, what's
he's
his age?
old.
He's older.
He could have 20 years on her, at least.
How old is David? He could also have 20 years on her,
Right?
but,
She's 14.
Now, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. She's at least 18.
They, legal age.
All right,
What
so
were-
anyway,
Where were his, when did he have kids prior to,
when did he have them?
Bless you.
Not much before.
but he had
Yes,
children
we'll get his old
prior
kids
to
soon.
this?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have more kids. So, he's also got 3 wives already,
Right.
that we already,
David?
David, yeah. He's got Michal, whom he doesn't have kids with. He has Macha, and he has, what's her name that he picked up from Nabal, Abigail. So he's got at least 3 wives by this time. But it's good to be the king. And, and we know from Michal's complaint about David coming up with the ark that the women kind of swarm him. He apparently is a good-looking guy. And by the way, he's a redhead.
He was a redneck.
So,
I wanted to be a redneck.
he lay with her, she just purified herself after a period, and she went back home. The woman conceived, and she sent word to David saying, I'm pregnant. Her main chance paid off. Or, oh my God, this one-night stand has worked out this way. Then word goes back to David, in effect saying, what's she saying to him by saying I am pregnant? Why is she telling him?
do something about it.
Do something about it.
What?
Yeah.
Hey, this is a problem. Do something about it. Does anybody know that she was there with him?
Whoever he sent to go get her.
The messengers.
If
Yeah.
the messenger knows that he was with her, does anybody else know? Probably. Why?
Doesn't mind.
They talk.
They talk.
He's
This is upstairs, downstairs gang. I never saw it, but I understand that there was. Gossip is the,
I don't think so.
you know,
the television, the cable was on the fritz. at the
right,
time.
exactly. Cable was in and out, so gossip becomes the big thing. So she sent a message back to him, and she sent the message back. She didn't show up to say, by the way, I'm pregnant. She sends somebody with the message.
What?
I am pregnant. Okay. Thereupon David sent a message to Joab, send Uriah the Hittite to me, and Joab sent Uriah the Hittite. Okay? Joab is the general in charge of the army. Uriah is one of his subordinates. Send Uriah to me. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab and the troops were faring and how the war was going. That is, why does he want Uriah to come back? He wants
A report.
a report. Right? That's why he wants him back. No. Then notice how the narrator dismisses that whole thing in one sentence. Now we have a conversation. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and bathe your feet. Bathe your feet.
Interesting euphemism.
Well, is it so?
Well, yeah.
What does bathe your feet mean?
Purifiers?
Take
Well, when you
comfort
welcome
someplace,
When you
because
welcome a guest,
Remember?
So they're right. When you welcome a guest, why do you bathe their feet?
because they've been out in the sand and.
Right. And what kind of
sandals.
they're wearing
Walking
sandals.
through
Everybody's wearing
desert
sandals,
and
right?
sandals.
Desert sand. One of the things you do is you wash your feet. It feels good. Bathe your feet. But Susie picked it up right away. It's a euphemism, or it's very likely to be used, or at least it's a euphemism that it's a reality that would lead to the euphemism.
Euphemism for what? Having
Sex.
Go lie with your wife.
Go lie with your wife. Hey,
Oh, yeah.
you've been on the front lines. I brought you back. I got the message. You know what? While you're here, go back to your wife. Why? I mean, what's the point here?
So
that it's his
she
baby,
could
not
be
hers.
pregnant.
Right. This is his attempt to try to make things right by getting an act that would make this child seem to be Uriah's. Okay? So, and boy,
It's a redhead.
Whatever, you got this redhead.
if it comes out of redhead, then you're in real trouble. Right?
They did that DNA testing, so.
DNA testing was also not quite there. You go.
No, but that redhead would have been enough.
Yeah, that would have done
That's the
something.
smoking gun.
Right. So go down to your house and bathe your feet. Bathe here also could really mean go down and get your feet washed. Your wife will wash your feet. You know what's gonna happen. And it's not like David doesn't have a willing partner down there to try to get the stuff happening. She's in trouble too, or at least apparently.
He's too ethical.
When Uriah left the royal palace, a present from the king followed him. He sent along, the word mishkat here usually means a food gift, like a feast or a nice something. I'll just send some food along, you know. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the royal palace, along with the other officers of his lord, and did not go down to his house. He stays overnight on the hard floor by the entrance of the palace. He doesn't go down to the. When David was told that Uriah had not gone down to his house, he said, Uriah, you just came from a journey. Why did you go down to your house? You were on the road this time. Why did you sleep at home? That's ridiculous. Uriah answered David, the ark and Israel and Judah are located at Sukkot. My master Joab and your majesty's men are camped in the open. How can I come home and eat and drink and sleep with my wife? The ark of God, which accompanied the army into the field as God's protector. God is the protector. We know that the ark was went out with the armies from first of all stories in Torah when Joshua goes out to battle against the Amalekites. But the big story is the one where Eli the priest's sons take it out in the battle against the Philistines and lose it. And the Philistines capture the ark. So there's a big whole to-do about the capture of the ark. It is that story about the capture of the ark and what it does, devastating the Philistines. Plague goes through the Philistines. Every day they put the ark in the temple of their god, and the next morning they find the statue of the god on the floor, bowing down to the ark with its hands and feet cut off, and there's this plague going through, killing people, and so the Philistines move it to another city. Why don't you take the ark for a while? Why don't you take the ark for a while? Until they actually send it back. It is that story and the one about when David takes the ark up to Jerusalem, somebody touches the ark and dies on the spot. That led, of course, to the Indiana Jones, that documentary, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we know the ark went into battle with them. He personifies the ark. God's ark is out in the field. The soldiers from Israel and Judah are in the field. Remember, we've got two countries. We really have two countries here, Israel and Judah. So they're combined under David, who's the king of both. They're out in the field sleeping on the ground. I can't take comfort at home. I identify with them out in the field. So what do you think of this guy Uriah?
He's an honorable guy.
He seems like a pretty honorable guy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
There's another possibility here.
Yeah, sensible.
He might have
Wasn't-
been guilty. Maybe he was fooling around too.
Where?
With
Where's he?
whom?
I don't know,
He's
with a
out of
sheep
the-
or something. I'm serious, it could have been anything. but-
So, you think Uriah knows anything?
Yes.
Maybe.
Why do you think he knows something?
Because the
People
servants talk.
The messenger.
He didn't go home to his wife.
He didn't want to have her after David did.
Yeah. The possibility is he deliberately doesn't go home because he heard what happened and he's not going to go to her after David's had her.
I didn't know that.
It's hard for the messenger to keep it from.
Well, it just.
Upstairs, downstairs. The gospel, it has to have been noticed that she was there, even if the messengers didn't say anything.
Right?
Did Uriah find out about this? Did Uriah say, well then, forget her? And deliberately say that, and then it gives this wonderful thing, how can I possibly sleep at home when everybody's out in the field?
That was his ploy.
Look, his play is, laundry. I brought you here to hear a report, but, why don't you go home? And he said, oh, I could hardly do that with everybody out in the field. Is that what's going on here? It's not clear. Not at all clear. On the surface, Uriah is just a really wonderful guy.
Boy, are you suspicious? Wow.
No, I'm not the first one who's suspicious of this. And in fact, I prefer the Uriah.
That Uriah was a good guy.
I like the Uriah who really is identifying with everybody in the field, but I can't not say that Uriah doesn't exist, and it makes all kinds of sense. He shows them somebody said something to him, and he said, he could often think about, I can't compete with the king. I mean, if he wants her, who am I? And I'm not going to go home and get in the way. The king could have me killed. I mean, if he wants her, he's going to take her. In the ancient world, king could have anything he wanted.
Yeah,
Why don't you take it?
he could also be saying, I'm not going to go home.
Yeah,
I'm going to ruin it for her.
yeah. Could be. It very well could be. He may have heard that she was she slept with him, she's pregnant. Because she had a messenger back.
Okay, with all these messengers that are going back and forth, so isn't she guilty of adultery and shouldn't she be
Hello?
stoned? No, and shouldn't she be stoned? I mean, she's
Hello?
stone-worthy.
Hello?
Okay.
We'll get there. I
She
mean,
committed
Wow,
adultery with the king.
yeah, well,
There's a room in the back of the bus.
we got some real problems here with this activity going on here that we're going to have to talk about when we get to the end of the story. How did I go home and eat and sleep and drink and sleep with my wife? By your very life, I will not do that. I just can't do that. David said to Uriah, you know what? Stick around today. Tomorrow I'll send you off. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem a day. The next day David summoned him. He ate and drank with him until he got him drunk. What's David's ploy now? Get him drunk enough so that
He'll go
That
home.
he'll
he'll go home.
with his wife.
So it loses inhibitions. Don't sleep on the floor. You drunk enough. Don't want to go home. Don't want to water. But in the evening, when I was sleeping in the same place with the Lord's officers, he didn't go home. He's either a saint,
Foiled again.
or he's really sticking to him, or he's not as drunk as David thought he was, but he's not going home.
There's a lot of ifs here.
Whatever.
He did not go home.
You can everybody can decide for themselves who Uriah is, but his actions, no matter what his motivation is, are the same. He doesn't go home. And David's stuck here with the knowledge that this is, she's pregnant and Uriah didn't sleep with her, and everybody in the castle, in the palace knows who did sleep with her, and it's adultery.
Is it adultery for the two individuals, or just
Yeah.
one?
Yes, it's adultery for both of them.
Okay.
If she's married, they're both guilty.
But is it adultery for the king? He's the king, he can do no wrong.
Well,
according to-
see, so that's my next question.
Well,
If he is spending all his time trying to get Uriah to sleep with his wife, what's the framework of this whole thing? It's that the king is not above the law. Everywhere else that we know of in the world, not only at that time, but to this day, the king wants that woman, he gets that woman. That's it. You're married to her for too bad. Too bad. You want to contest it? You could die too. It's on your way.
I always told you I should be king.
Yeah.
look at you.
Wait a
But-
minute, Jonathan just shot the arrows, he was not.
Right.
Here, it's clear that David is what? Embarrassed, guilty, he certainly considers himself culpable, and he certainly considers himself to have done something wrong. He's trying to cover up something that's wrong.
Right.
No other king in the world would be worrying about covering up this wrong thing. That says something, and we're talking 3,000 years ago, not 200 years ago.
Well, I mean, if he had unlimited power, he could just simply have, the general assassinate.
Hello?
Uriah, that's what
In
he
the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab,
Have you never read it?
which he sent with Uriah. He writes a letter, he gives it to Uriah, he puts his stamp on it, so that it's not open until it gets to Joab. He wrote him a letter as follows: place Uriah in the front line where the fight is fierce, and fall back so he may be killed. So when Joab was besieging the city, he stationed Uriah at the point where he knew there were able warriors. The men of the city sallied out and attacked Joab, and some of David's officers among the troops fell. Uriah the Hittite was among those who died. Joab sent a full report of the battle to David. He instructed the messenger as follows: when you finish reporting to the king all about the battle, the king may get angry and say to you, why did you come so close to the city to attack it? Didn't you know what they would shoot from the wall? Who struck down Avimelech, the son of Uriah? You all know that story. In the book of Judges, there is a civil war going on within the Israelite community. Two sides, both of whom are in the wrong, go to war with each other. The guy who commands the best troops is Avimelech, the son of Uriah, not Uriah, but Uriah, who is trying to, who's been kicked out of his job as the king of the tribe, and has gotten his troops back to go forth and take it back. And after he wins the battle, the remnants of the people he defeats, the Israelites defeat, go up in a tower over the wall, and he gets too close to the wall, and a woman drops a millstone on his head because he was too close to the wall. You're fighting, you don't get close to the wall because they could drop something on you. You have to be 5-10 feet away from the wall so that if they're going to do something, they have to throw it. But if you're right down below, there you go. It's like boiling oil, right? People trying to climb the wall boiling oil, it's really tough. If you're not near the wall, boiling oil doesn't work because they can't get the oil to you. Same thing here. So yours is, he's going to get angry and say, how come he was so close to the wall? Don't you know any tactics? Remember what happened to Avimelech, the son of Uriah? Was it not a woman who dropped an upper millstone on him from the wall at Tebez, from which he died? Why did you come so close to the wall? And then say, your servant Uriah the Hittite was among those killed. That will make him less angry. Did he tell the messenger that was David's intention, to have Uriah killed? No. But to say that line will make David less angry. It's a message. The messenger set out. He came and told David all that Joab said to him. The messenger of David, first the men prevailed against and sallied out against us in the open. Then we drove them back up to the entrance of the gate. But the archers shot at your men from the wall, and some of your majesty's men fell. Your servant Uriah the Hittite also fell. Instead of telling him this is a postscript, he puts it in the body of the message. He doesn't want David that angry for me at all. Whereupon David said to the messenger, "Give Joab your message. Don't be distressed about the matter. The sword always takes its toll. Press your attack on the city and destroy it. Encourage him." That is, things happen in battle. They do. I understand. Just keep working at it. You'll get there. You'll win. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah was dead, she lamented over her husband. You got it. Sit shit on her. After the period of mourning was over, David sent and had her brought to the pasture and became his wife. And she bore him a son. So, right? He got past it. It took a murder, a little adultery, but
It was a
But
coincidence.
whose son would they say this was?
they will say it's David's son because they're now married. This is all happening. She sent it back that she's pregnant because she has her period. She's in her period. She lies with him. 2 weeks later, she doesn't have a period. So sent back to think I'm pregnant. He gets them right back. We're talking a month between sleeping with her and marrying her.
What if she was still married to Uriah
When
when she has the child and David finds out she has a son? What would have happened?
that is, if she did not tell him,
Yes.
and Uriah was still alive,
Yes.
and Uriah hadn't slept with her,
Yeah. But David.
what would happen? Good question.
He'd say he was Jesus, oh.
Good question. Because that's not how it worked out.
This name Uriah, as it's called in England, because you have Uriah Heath in
As you've noticed, I put on everything except David's name in Hebrew.
right. But I noticed that, it doesn't seem like this name is very popular among Jews.
It is now.
It is?
Yeah, there's a fair number of Uriahs.
Really?
Yeah, it's not David or Shmuel, but yeah, it is. Modern, not medieval or early medieval. Uriah was not a popular name then, but it's,
Yeah, Uri, or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah, there are a lot of Uris.
Uri, right, or Uri, right.
Uri. And somebody named Uriah we usually call Uri.
Right.
Uriel.
So it's usually Uriah.
Yeah,
So, all right, a little adultery, a little, it's not quite murder. It's in
If you
war.
hire a gun.
it's pretty much murder.
It's murder.
He specified, go up there and then pull the men back.
Yeah. True. I mean,
So it's pretty much murder.
Was overturned.
And this is our war.
by the way, there's nothing,
Murder.
so here are the two things.
Not murdered.
None of this is provable anything. Susie asked a question about this being adultery. And we know it's adultery. Will you get convicted? No.
There were witnesses.
Witnesses.
Nancy has an observation.
What was it?
Didn't he,
I'd say so much.
Why didn't you
I
use a
said,
condom? I
didn't he
know.
notice, no, didn't he notice that the other troops had pulled back and left him there?
He was busy fighting.
Right.
They're out there. Hey. Oh my God! There's nobody here to protect.
I guess that's as good as anything. We could get it right there.
And that was the other one who died in that battle, by the way.
listen, in your retirement years, you have to join a community theater.
Shouldn't he have thought that it was a little suspicious that all of a sudden David is sending him out to the front line against the most fierce?
David didn't send him. Joab did.
Yoav did.
Yoab sent it.
Well,
He sends a message. Yoab says,
But he doesn't know it's David.
Yoab sets up the battle,
That's the way it
and
works.
it's the way Yoab sets up the battle that Uriah doesn't. I don't think he would be suspicious. And even if he's suspicious,
so what?
so what? He was ordered to do this.
And if he was gonna sleep at the gates and not go home, he was
There's
doing
a guy let it go, right?
He wasn't the only one killed
He
either.
followed.
Right, this is not the only one
It's not like
killed.
everybody else ran back.
Right. there's more than just Uriah who was killed in this attack, which makes it, by the way, even more not so wonderful.
It would be better if it was just one.
Right. Well,
So more than one.
but the Lord, so we have the kid, we're all set, right? David got
Little
pissed.
redhead.
But the Lord was displeased with what David had done. Well,
You
there's
think?
a thought for you.
Yeah.
And the Lord, but God does something about it. The Lord sent Nathan to David. Nathan's David's prophet. He came to him and said, there were two men in the same city, one rich and one poor. The rich man had very large flocks and herds, but the poor man had only one little ewe lamb that he had bought. He tended it. It grew up together with him and his children. He used to share his morsel of bread, drink from his cup, and nestle in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him.
That's weird.
Oh
Just
my
right there, that's freaking weird.
We're really, can you see the trowel here laying it on? Really thick, right? Actually, we're kind of laughing and turning our eyes up, but in a world when, it's like a dog,
Yeah.
right? In a world in which you've got domesticated animals, and dogs are not necessarily domesticated. You know, he's got kids, the kids pet him. How many? The 4-H'ers. 4-H'ers
Right.
fall in love with their little lambs and calves, etc. And when you take them out to kill them, some of them, what? Right? So, this is not completely impossible, but he is laying it on a little bit thick. One day a traveler came to the rich man. But the rich man was loath to take anything from his own flocks or herds to prepare a meal for the guests who come. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who would come to him.
Get it.
Nice guy.
Yeah.
What did you just sneak in and take it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was in his bosom.
Well,
He fed from his cup.
he sent over, the rich guy's got servants. He sent over a couple of his servants,
Big guys.
you know, sent over the enforcers and said, we need your lamb. No.
Tough cookies.
Right? Now,
It's a little scary.
you've heard this. Why does Nathan tell the story? The king? What's one of the king's jobs?
To be the judge.
Yeah, the king's judge. So Nathan is presenting them as a true event and asking David as a judge, how did you feel? And notice David's reaction.
Yeah.
Rage.
David flew in a rage against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, that man who did this deserves to die. He may not have convicted him, but he wants this guy in front of him so he can dress him down minimally. He shall pay for the land 4 times over, because he did such a thing and showed no pity. 4 times over? 4-fold. Torah says that if you steal a lamb or a sheep and you sell it, you're to pay the owner, and you're caught, you pay 4 times the value of the sheep. Right? It's 5 times the value of a cow and 4 times the value of a sheep. And that's in the Torah. David's got things exactly what the Torah says. As if David had a copy of the Torah right next to him, which of course the Midrash says he did. And this proves it.
Right.
And Nathan said to David, that man's you. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Look, I'm the one who anointed you king over Israel. It was I who rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and possession of your master's wives. The new king got possession of the old king's harem. There's no evidence that David took any kind of advantage of that, because the only names that we have are names of wives who we know that he married directly, but he had the right to them. And we're going to see this show up again if we have time. This idea show up again a little bit later. And I gave you the house of Israel and Judah, and if that wasn't enough, I gave you twice as much more. Why then have you flouted the command of the Lord and done what displeased him? You put Uriah the Hittite to the sword. You took his wife and made him your wife. His wife and made him your wife. You had him killed by the sword of the Ammonites. Therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you spurned me by taking the wife of Uriah the Hittite and making her your wife. Thus says the Lord, I will make a calamity rise against you from within your own house. I will take your wives and give them to another man before your very eyes. he'll sleep with your wives under this very sun. You acted in secret? I'll make this happen in the sight of all Israel in broad daylight.
Wow.
Okay.
The Lord was pissed.
Oh my God.
Nathan the prophet shows up in front of Antiochus and says, "You're the guy, you're a nasty, terrible guy, you did this thing." What would happen to Nathan the prophet? Who shows up in front of the king and starts
And
screaming
yells
at
at
him?
Yeah. And creepy.
But Nathan is confident enough to show up in front of David and scream at him and say, "You're the one, you were guilty of this, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You keep this a secret. I'm in public. I'm telling you that God's going to embarrass you in front of everybody because of what you did." And David's reaction, of course, is to tell the guys next to him to cut off his head. No. David said to Nathan, "I stand guilty before the Lord." David's reaction to be scolded is,
To admit it.
"You're right. I don't know what I don't know what I was thinking. This is just against everything that I should be doing. This is not against what God told me to do." When Nathan says, "You have flouted the command of the Lord and done what displeases him," when you stop to think about just the 10 Commandments, he blew 3 of them. Right? He coveted, committed adultery, and committed murder. How many more is, we've done a whole lot more here to go. He's down. And David is the king who feels the necessity to cover up all of this stuff. Not just say, "Well, I'm the king." Now accepts from the Nathan the prophet that he's guilty. And Nathan replied to David, "The Lord has remitted your sin. You shall not die. However, since you spurned the enemies of the Lord by this deed, even the child about to be born to you shall die." Nathan went home. The Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife had born to David and became critically ill. David entreated God for the boy. David fasted. He went and spent the night lying on the ground. The senior servants of his household tried to induce him to get up from the ground, but he refused, nor did he partake food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell David that the child was dead, for they said, "We spoke to him when the child was alive, he wouldn't listen to us. Why do you tell him that the child is dead? He might do something terrible." When David saw his servants talking in whispers, David understood the child was dead. David asked his servants, "Is the child dead?" "Yes." Thereupon David rose from the ground, he bathed and anointed himself. And robe, which is really hot out, anointing yourself is a way of keeping cool and keeping from being sunburned. That's why you don't anoint on Yom Kippur.
You don't anoint.
Anoint on Yom Kippur. That's one of the 5 things you're not allowed to do. Bathing and anointing are 2 things you can't do. And he changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord, the place where the ark was apparently, the tent. And he prostrated himself. They went home and asked for food, which they set before him, and he ate. His courtiers asked him, "Why do you act in this manner? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. The child is dead, you rise and take food." He replied, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept because I thought, who knows, the Lord may have pity on me. Maybe the child will live. Now he's dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back? I shall go to him, but he will never come back to me."
So meanwhile, it's the baby that suffers.
Yeah.
Several days. So,
But don't you think they suffered because the baby died?
Yes,
but the baby's
but the baby's the one who pays the price.
Or, what that last line, which is fascinating to me, I shall go to him, he'll never come back to me.
Right.
He says what? What does that say?
That we believe in an afterlife.
It's an afterlife. And if if there's an afterlife, I will be joined with him in that afterlife.
Right.
If in a world in which people died all the time, in which half of pregnancies didn't make it past 1 month, when a quarter of babies who were born died, and another quarter were miscarriages, the idea that that soul is somehow in a better place
Right.
is, and that we'll be together. At some point we'll be together, was apparently a comfort to them. In many ways, that's still the response in the Western world to, especially to death of young people is, everybody dies. At some point we'll meet again in the future. I went to, there was a, you have to do this, you can do this in our cemetery, but County made a cemetery in Queens a couple of years ago. Just this small postage dice thing, just chock-a-block, just every space was full. And as we left the cemetery, I looked at the tombstones, which, one next to the other. People who died in the 1920s and 1930s, about a third of them were under the age of 15. That's what the world was like, right? And then I thought to myself, if those people had survived past their childhood, they would be dead today. All done. David, we died. So the suffering that leads to death, which to us in the 21st century, in the 20th century, is really, that's terrible, that's awful. It's what life was like, and in effect, this is a punishment for David. Not the baby. Baby's not punished. The soul of the baby is back in the afterlife.
Do you think it's significant that that baby died on the 7th day?
Absolutely.
It was
Yeah,
no
before,
risk.
I don't
day
think
before,
there's any question.
So,
Grant.
Day before Brit Milah, or sevens are a big thing in Tanakh. I mean, there's no question.
All over the place, yeah.
It just is. So yes, absolutely. So, what do you think of David?
It's not long.
He's a bum. Such a bum. Why doesn't God take the kingdom away from him? He did it to Saul. Right? Saul comes back from the battle, and he didn't kill one guy, and he brought back some goats and sheep, and Samuel comes to him and says, God says that's it. You can't have a dynasty.
because God told Saul what to do and what not to do. David did this on his own. It wasn't something that God told him not to do.
Really?
Well, or to do or not.
Does
Yeah.
David
When
think
did he
he
tell
did
him not
something-
to do
Does
this?
David think he did something wrong?
Sure.
He clearly thought he did something wrong.
They got caught.
And now he gets caught. By who catches him? God caught him. Right? So when David is doing the act, when he's doing the adultery, when he's lying with Bathsheba, he knows this is the wrong thing to do. And we can tell he knows the wrong thing because he gets rid of the evidence as best he can. And the evidence, and it would have worked. Except that God comes through Nathan and says, I told you what to do. I commanded you, and look what you did. And the punishment's going to be, this is going to happen to you. But the punishment is not, I'm taking the kingdom away from you. Like it was for Saul.
Because God thought that David was useful. He united
David's
the
useful.
kingdoms.
Okay. David's really
He could-
talented.
Talented.
You can't,
I think because the Messiah is supposed to come from the house of David, so he has to survive.
that's putting the cart in front of the horse.
Right.
The Messiah the idea of the Messiah coming to the house of David comes because David survives and has children who
Right.
become the king.
Right.
If, theoretically at this point, God could have, should have, just hauled the kingdom away from him and appointed somebody else.
But that's why he's not allowed to build the temple.
Well, why is he not allowed to build the temple? Because he's a warrior, he's got blood on his hands. Not for this. This isn't the reason.
Isn't it showing something about how God is going to interact with people who commit sins and are able to repent along their lives?
So why doesn't the kingdom get hauled away from David? David? Fern?
I would think you want him to be an example of how
Well,
God
he
is going to.
repented.
He repented.
David is
Right,
special.
exactly.
Did Saul repent?
No,
Right.
he
And he
said,
suffered
but
for
it
it.
was only this one guy, and
And
they
made-
took the
right,
booty.
Right, he tried to make it look good
Right,
for himself.
right. They're the ones who did it. And then at the end, when Samuel says, "You messed up," he says, "No, I didn't. I really did obey God." And what does David do? He says, "I blew it. You're absolutely right. I don't understand how, but I did it."
It's accepting responsibility. So did David.
David did.
It was more of a normal way of human beings, the way human beings act. People do things wrong and they have to.
Right. By the way, both of them do. Saul continues to deny it and put the blame on him. David does try to cover up, but when he's caught, he doesn't kill the messenger. He could have killed. If he killed Nathan on the spot, he could have kept going. But he doesn't. He says, "I did it."
David is clearly special. I mean, he kind of stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
He is. You're
Joseph stands out, you know,
Joe, you're absolutely correct.
They-
There is every reason to see David as being really special. Here is a real mess up. He really messed up.
What about the story of David and
Literally
Goliath?
screwed up, by the way.
Does that happen
What?
before this,
Sorry?
David and Goliath? Does that
Yes,
happen
way before
That
this.
was when he
That's
Okay,
what David gets in.
so then, that's another indication of how special he is.
There's no, and he has knocked off the Philistines, and now he's going and conquering in other places. He's really something. He gets loyalty, he's charismatic, he's the best general that Saul ever has. Did the fact that he became king, he builds a palace, and he's got Jerusalem go to his head, and he sees this beautiful girl, and let's, and then he realizes he's done wrong. He tries to cover up and does it even worse, and then when he's confronted by Nathan and God, he says, "You're right." And and when he's told that this kid is going to die, what does he do? He goes to God and says, "Please, God, please, you know that he doesn't eat, he's really, really upset at what he did." Do we see anything ever of Saul being that upset? No.
He recognizes he's human.
He recognizes his fault and he's human, and God recognizes his fault and he's human, but the fact is that God says, it's clear that God said, "You repented. You repented. That's what I need from people, for them to repent."
This is quintessential morality, right? Because a great king is not beyond the law, and God is always bearing witness.
The only place that a great king is not beyond the law is here, in this place. There is no other evidence of any other place in the world until the fall of the monarchies where the king has, his king's power is curbed. Until we get 1215.
1280?
1215 CE, right?
John.
CE, John. King John.
Back
and
in
the-
Florida.
Yeah. Until we get 1215, there's no other kingdom in the world who ever has his power curbed. Just here. And it's not just him. When Ahab pulls something similar, because Ahab wanders by a vineyard. He's king of the northern tribes of Israel. He wants to buy a vineyard. "Oh, I like this vineyard." And Naboth says, "Nope, not selling." And what's the reaction? He goes home sad. He can't buy the vineyard. He's the king, for God's sake. He can't buy the vineyard. His wife Jezebel, who comes from Lebanon, says, "What are you talking about? You can't, you're the king." He says, "We don't do it that way." So Jezebel figures out a way to get Naboth executed. She gets false witnesses to say that he cursed the king, and the vineyard comes to Ahab. And who shows up? Elijah. And he says, that's it. I've had it with this murdering stuff. That's it for you as the king, Ahab. Your line is gone.
Once again, there's a woman.
That's good. All right. God appears to have forgiven David, and the next paragraph in this chapter says something.
Yeah.
This is the baby that was born that died after, what, 7 days? They didn't give it a name or anything because it didn't reach 8 days?
So, the interesting, apparently, that appears to be the case. There's an interesting, the traditionalists amongst us and the rabbis in the Middle Ages asked the question, what do you mean the baby died, he got up and started eating and put on new clothes and went about his life? What are you supposed to do when somebody dies? Shiva. Where's the Shiva here?
Terrier.
Right? And they presume that David would have known about Shiva, that all the traditions that we do now were done back then, and David certainly knew the Torah. Cover to cover, and
She said Shiva, so he knew of it.
right, yes,
Would you do
clearly
it
she
for a
said
baby?
Shiva, right.
Well, you would do it for a baby before the baby was circumcised?
Very, yes. In fact, the halacha is that you do not sit Shiva for a baby less than 30 days old.
Really?
That's the halacha. So, talking about, we're talking about more than 100 years ago, okay? Woman gets pregnant in the year 1850 or 850 or 850 BCE. Woman gets pregnant. First child. You have a room designated for the baby. Do you go out and get the baby? No. When do you get it?
After the baby.
After it was born. Why?
You don't want to give it any horror.
It's not getting horror. Why? How did it develop that you don't put the baby's room together?
Because babies died all the time.
Babies died.
Right.
When women got pregnant 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, they did not bond with those babies in the same way we do today. There's
Well, they gave them to wet places.
Well, KJ separates.
No, I'm not talking about afterbirth.
He's talking about being pregnant. You don't
I'm talking
want
about pregnant.
in utero.
We, today, every couple who's ever had a baby, that baby's born, it's moving and you're feeling and you're getting the ultrasound and you're taking names and we go to the store and we get this and they have a baby shower and they didn't do baby showers 1,000 years ago.
That's what he said?
But you still don't.
Miscarriage is no big deal.
Except they do. But the traditionalists don't because 1,000 years ago, 200 years ago, that baby was as likely to die before they were 30 days old. And so you did not bond in utero. You started bonding afterwards, and then if the baby were to die, you don't have nearly the trauma that people today do. And as a result, halakha was, you didn't bond, you didn't have this emotion, you don't have to sit shiva. Of course, the last 100 years, that's changed, last 80 years, that's changed dramatically as a result. In the conservative movement, there is a series of halakhic statements about sitting shiva for infants who died because we do bond in utero. We do. They didn't.
Yeah, but it says he consoled her.
What does it mean he consoled her? Let's read that passage.
Back to bed.
Yeah.
That means back to bed. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
David consoled his wife Bathsheba. The baby was born, it was there, they were starting the baby, there is some emotion there, but it's not, what I'm trying to say is that it's not the same kind of emotion that we do have today. If we had a baby and the baby died in 7 days, I've buried them. I've seen the parents. It's just horrible. It's not quite the emotion they have. Yeah, there was emotion, but not quite.
It was so terrible that they had sex, right? He got consoled, then they laid together and she got pregnant.
David consoled his wife Bathsheba. It doesn't say how long until he did.
Right.
Okay.
He went and lay with her, she bore a son, and she named him Solomon. This woman whom he had committed adultery with becomes the mother of the next king. The Lord favored him. God liked this king. If you really want to be talking about God who's in charge of everything, that God sent Bathsheba up on that roof so that Bathsheba would be the mother of Solomon. God favored him.
Well, you're talking about God puppet master
Right.
again.
No.
And that's
Yeah, but then
not,
Bernie becomes a murderer.
That's not the theology that Judaism has
Right.
espoused most of the time.
right.
But every once
In
in a
this
while,
instance,
Maybe.
every once in a while, you get somebody who makes a comment like, this was part of God's plan,
Mhm.
kind of thing. So God made him a puppet master, but God's got a plan. He sent a message through the prophet Nathan. God told Nathan to go talk to him. His name is Yedidiah, which means friend of God,
Who was
beloved
named?
of God, Solomon.
Who was named Jedidiah?
Solomon.
Jedediah.
Solomon.
I was trying to imitate him.
So why do we call him
Why,
Solomon
where did that come
if
from?
he's
There are,
Yedidiah?
and there's a statement in Chronicles that a man named Elhanan killed Goliath. There appears to be we know it's the case throughout the world that when people take the throne, they often change their names, right?
Just like the Pope.
The Pope is a classic example of that. Your name could be Ernestino Umberto, and you take John Paul II or whatever,
Right.
John Paul III, whatever it is. You
The
change
English
your name.
kings will change their name.
Right, exactly. And that seems to be the case here. It doesn't say it specifically, but if Elhanan in the Book of Chronicles, one who killed Goliath, Elhanan and David, so David took the throne name. Yedidiah could have been the kid's name, and he took the throne name Solomon.
She
Or-
named him Solomon.
But she named
Or, well, according to the passage, she named Solomon. God names him Yedidiah because he's beloved of God. He's the beloved of God. Now, let's continue on with David's family.
You know, when you read the stuff on your own,
Yes.
it's impossible to get all this out of.
That's why you're reading it with me.
That's why we're having this class.
This happened sometime afterwards. Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister named Tamar. Amnon, the son of David, became infatuated with her. Now, Absalom and Tamar are the children of one wife, Maacah, and Amnon is, of Abigail, and Amnon is the son of Maacah, and Amnon is the oldest kid on the line. David's got he's getting tons of kids. He ends up with 18 wives, all these kids. Yeah, well, Solomon has 700 sons.
In the Bible, you don't want to be the first kid. It's not a good place.
Except that makes him the crown prince.
Yeah.
And Amnon,
But look what happens to all
well,
of
no, Amnon brings it on himself.